You in?
Trying to do fast. It is frustrating because this thing, they don't put in like convenient spots, right?
What's the matter, Oliver?
That's what it felt like.
Can you get it?
I hope so.
Kelly's like, and my time ends here.
Forget.
Just make sure it's on too, the mouse.
Yep. Okay. You good? Yes, sir.
I'd like to bring tonight's meeting to order, but first, Pledge of Allegiance. Please all rise. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board had an executive session tonight, and
Robinson, you are muted.
No, I'm not. I can hear you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
the board went into executive session to discuss the superintendent's mid-year evaluation and other contractual matters. So, as we go, let me call the meeting to order, huh? Can I get a motion? Bob is first. Okay. So, I'd like to make an announcement tonight, and for the second time this year, I have to make this announcement, and it weighs very heavy on me and on my heart, but I regret to inform the public, as my board colleagues know, Dr. Robinson, Christina Rajat has tendered her resignation to the Board of Education and her vice president role on the board. Due to personal reasons, her husband's health, she has, of course, made the decision to take care of him and put her family first, as, you know, is the right thing to do. I have worked with Christina since my first years in Orangen. She was leading PTA there, and we kind of walked hand in hand all the way through Orangen together. And as she went on to PTA council, kind of a mentor to me, really. We went through CODA together, and then I followed her as president of PTA council, and then on to the Board of Education. Wonderful, wonderful friend, mentor, colleague. She brought sincerity to this board, always about the students, always, you know, what could we do for those high-achieving, middle, low-achieving students, because in her own family, she had all three of those. So, with that, I'm going to miss her terribly. But I know she's not far away. But I would wish that my board colleagues and the community, my colleagues in the room tonight, keep her family and her in your thoughts and prayers. Bob?
I would like to echo your sentiments and really would like to point out one of the major accomplishments she brought to this board in the last 6 years. She really advocated for mental health. With her background and her insertion of comments in the communications back and forth and conversations. And very early on, we've sustained this. We have some excellent mental health programs for students in need. So I think, you know, I'm realizing how much of a difference she made for an untold number of students, where they felt comfortable enough to bring forward a concern early, or if they had held that concern within them, they knew they could bring it later on and get help. I think that there are an untold number of students and families that owe her a huge amount of gratitude for what she did with those conversations.
Thank you, Bob.
It's been a pleasure to work with her these last few years. She was she was like my buddy when I got here. She really kind of, you know, helped show me the ropes. So it's a loss for all of us.
I echo everything that you said, Deanna. I first got to know her as a PTA president. She was advising me through as a PTA council president. So that's how I first met her, and that's actually how I met you as well. And it was a relationship that I needed. She's always been a guide. She's salve for the soul. I mean, she always had kind things to say. She was a very tempered person. She's going to be missed. It's not going to be the same without Christina on this board. But I understand why she's doing what she's doing. I would do the same if I were in her shoes. And we will be there. She's still part of this family. So she will be missed. Thank you.
So Christina and I talked. I'm not going to repeat everything everybody said. She knows how highly I thought of her, and her and I will keep in touch, and she will be missed. So everybody said what they needed to say, and I agree with all of it, and everything else is between Christina and I.
Thank you, everybody, for your sentiments. Okay. So at this point, we can do board comments too, if we want to go further, or does anybody want to do board comments tonight? Okay. Grace, I'll let you go first from a student perspective.
All right, so, assuming I have a good enough memory, I believe on 6th of January.
Give her my-
Oh, Gusta, can you give her the microphone?
Sorry.
So, okay. On January 6th, we had a personnel and professionalism meeting for the Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity. And we were just revising the form that me and Joyce Wu made to kind of get the student perspective on the profile of a Shen employee and just kind of being able to gauge where that lies and getting specific with the terminology and things of that matter. And alongside that, both me and I know a few other students had helped send in some submissions for a podcast on similar topics to Ms. Bear. And with that, Happy New Year, and even though I've only been here as a student representative, I echo everyone else's sentiments as well.
I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year. It's good to be back here at the table. It's hard to move forward after the Christina stuff, so I'll stop there.
Naomi?
Yes, happy New Year, although we're only at the 12th day of January, but it feels like we're already months into the year. So welcome back, everyone. Because it has been such a difficult start to the year with all the negative news, I wanted to just, I thought about, how we use this time to report back. And so I wanted to focus on just one of the groups that, one of the teams that I work with, and just report back. And actually, I work with Gusta with that team. It's the high school partnership team. They recently recognized several individuals for the Mission Possible Awards, including Rob Cloutier and Eileen Tompkins for their work with the Aspire program, the high school lease maintenance team for all the work that they're doing to keep the buildings clean, High School West included, and one student was recognized from High School West, Austin Jean. I also wanted to highlight that they were able to issue their first podcast back in November, and that one was on social emotional learning. That podcast was put together by counselors, teachers, and students. And so the next one is in the works. The next one is actually going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're going to include excerpts from the Day of Dialogue, which took place back on December 16th, and it was a huge success, in my opinion. The team coordinating this effort, they're also going to coordinate with the Equity, Inclusivity, and Diversity Committee with putting together the podcast. And they're also going to reach out to IPAC, because IPAC recently, or in December, I believe it was December, where they asked the group to focus on all the good that's come out of remote learning, because there's been a lot of good from this new experience, and what can we see ourselves keeping going forward. So they're hoping to capture some of that also in this next podcast. So it'll be a bit different, but focusing on the positive. So we did meet last week, the subcommittee that I'm on, the cultural subcommittee, but I didn't want to share out because tomorrow is the larger group meeting, And I'd rather wait and see, and maybe Gus and I can share out what the larger group, the three subcommittees have been working on, because there's a lot that's taking place. And that's what I wanted to share during my board comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd?
Happy New Year to everybody. Here's to 2021 being a hell of a lot better than 2020 was. We made it through the year. I think we all did I think this district led the way in a lot of ways when it comes to our response to COVID, our response to everything. And I think we were a beacon for not only the community, but for other schools that didn't know what the heck they were doing. And I think that's a testament to you, Dr. Robinson, and the entire district. So that's it.
Bob, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I feel compelled to respond about the events of last week and how that should be interpreted by us as a board. Again, this is one person for one seat. We've had a massive confrontation among citizens with different views of the world and the way the world should be. But more importantly, they have different views of their duties as citizens. And I've struggled with how to understand this. And I've come to the realization that there's a movie, one of my favorite movies, called 12 Angry Men, and also it was a drama production from our students 2 years ago. And I recommend you watch it, because there's one of the jurors, and he's sort of a populist, but deep down as you see the story unfold, this person is a true racist. It's the racist juror. And near the end of the decision, and initially the jurors, many of them just don't want to deal with the duty of being a citizen. They often want to go home. They want to go to the baseball game. But this guy is played by a famous actor, Lee J. Cobb, in the movie, and by one of our seniors, Ella Palmer. And this is also to imply that it's not just men this way, but all people can be this way. Very popular, very kind of accepted by the group. But then you start to see the comments, and then the comments get stronger. And as the decision becomes tougher and tougher, you then get to see the hatred and racism come forward. Not hatred towards others, hatred towards others trying to get a better handle on the situation. And finally it blows up with this rant. And both the movie and the play, you quickly see the body language of the various jurors as they all start to turn their back on this character. And that is, I think, where we're at in this saga that we're going through right now. We saw the big opening, the big gaping wound Tuesday last week. And I think there may be more to come, but this is where you want to see how most of America, I think, will respond, is that we turn our back on the hatred, we turn our back on the manipulation, and we realize that we have a duty. In the case of the movie, the play, there's a duty to ensure there's a fair trial for the accused. Okay? And it started off with one juror in that camp, and slowly they got to a consensus that, yes, this is our obligation. And he becomes the last juror that has to, and is almost compelled by realizing that this isn't going to work. I'd like to use that to describe it, because you'll see in the next few minutes how this fits into how we viewed education. But a couple of my takeaways are, we really do look at our language. We start every meeting off, we start every school day off with the Pledge of Allegiance. We pledge allegiance to a flag, but we also, it's and to the Republic. We need to understand that the flag is a symbol, but the end to the Republic is the most important thing we have. What we saw last week was a physical attack between parts of the Republic, which is unacceptable. What I've seen in this district, and I've seen several examples, I noticed when I was on the IPAC committee several years ago, we started to do surveys to evaluate digital citizenship. And we noticed a couple years ago, we need to improve that. We felt the need to improve it. Last year, when we had the goals presentation, I was very encouraged to see Mr. Pace, and he talked about the things that our elementary schools that have taught for digital citizenship. So I think that's one of the key criteria now in modern America to bring forward. And I've been pleasantly surprised by a lot of the students, both my kids, their friends, some of the scouts in my kids' scout troop. They have a pretty good feel for what is the truth out there. They have a pretty good feel when there's an article, right away they're checking, what are the facts. I think we're doing a pretty good job in ensuring that the students are aware of that. think that would be a great topic for students to talk throughout the rest of the year. Have we figured it out? Is it on us? The last thing I think I came away realizing is maybe our desire, and I've seen this over the years, our desire to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And we really emphasize that. Okay, and it's important. It will get, your chances of getting a better paying job go up if you take those classes. But the thing that's helped me to better understand is the arts, history, communication, critical thinking, and some of that is not in that STEM sphere. So you probably want to think about where all this fits in. Maybe watching that movie or that play, running it again, gives you an idea of how the dynamic works, because you have so many people with different views of the world, and at the same time, we all have to be having humongous consensus on what our duties are as citizens. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you.
So, Bob and I didn't talk before, or comments tonight, but I do have a relatable conversation that I would like to share with everybody. So, I don't normally take everybody's comments, the emails that I get when we're not meeting, and share with everybody unless it's something that, it's shareable. But this one caught me. A gentleman had written a letter to me asking about critical race theory and if it was being taught at Shenendehowa. And if so, how was that being taught and why would it be being taught? So he started his journey with New York State Department of Education, trying to understand how curriculum is oriented and initiated at different school districts. He did find out that this critical race theory, and if you do not know what critical race theory is the view that law is inherently racist and that race is a social construct that exists to maintain elite interests. Okay. So this topic is being taught at, he had mentioned Buffalo School, public school. So I listened to this gentleman, and it was okay conversation. There was give and take, and I listened. I'm trying to understand where he's going with this. And then I went on to explain how we create our curriculum here at Shenendehowa and what it means. And what he was saying to me, something clicked in my head, and it was like, whoa. I don't agree. One, personally, I didn't agree. So I took that, and you can't change people's minds like this, right? My goal in this conversation was for him to understand that our students, and I talked about what happened last week, and I said, this is history, right? The Confederate flag, slavery, everything was history, and that is teachable. Those are teachable moments for our students. And I said to him, my senior daughter, when that happened last week, I hope, and it did happen, that in her national issues course the next day, that they were going to have this conversation. And they did. They had a good, open conversation, and they took opinions, and they tried to unpack what it meant, how they were feeling, what really happened. This is history. These are the things that we don't want to ingrain in our students. The reason why we have multicultural diversity, inclusivity, equity, conversations, the reason why we had 2 former students come up here at the beginning of our school year and talk to us, it's because we're all learning. This isn't a topic that is off topic. We all own this. And I know this, and this board will do, and we've started, these have been difficult conversations. Yes, Dr. Robinson? You have led these difficult conversations. It is in your mid-year evaluation about these conversations, and they will not stop happening. Our students deserve more. What we saw last week, I know my daughter lowered her head and said, what is happening? I'm scared. So I'm going to leave it there. But again, I left this gentleman If he wanted to talk to me again, I'd be more than happy to talk to him. And I did give him the link, Dr. Wood, to how we do create curriculum here at Shenendehowa. So, thank you for indulging me. Okay, so, yep. Students for conversation tonight. You see Trinity and Yi Chang.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. I appreciate your comments so far. We can start off with just what SK Senate has been up to. We are planning on hosting a pet show coming up, which is going to be exciting. So we can get the faculty, staff, students, even hopefully some board members involved in our pet show. So they can show off these pets, and there's going to be surprises for that too. It's not like a fundraiser event for the Senate. It's just an event where we're trying to engage students in our Shen community really in some fun actions. So that'll be fun. And additionally to our motives of engaging students, we will have on February 12th a video game tournament, and more information is going to come up in regards to that. We're going to have a couple of games that we're going to be playing. That'll be really fun. All virtual, of course, but yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we're also planning to resolutions. We're still doing the research, so just be on the lookout for that.
And I would also like to add, I appreciate the board members' comments in regards to what went down on last week, because as students, we are the future leaders of America, so we are here to receive and hear people's comments and exactly what's happening. And I appreciate the motive that's currently happening at Shen to make sure that the actions that happened last week do not happen again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, just building off that, we absolutely need to have those difficult conversations. So, like Trinity said, we really appreciate bringing this up.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. Because this meeting is being held with limited in-person attendance, if you are a district resident, please send questions, comments via boe@shenschools.org. All questions, comments come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and the superintendent. The board will not address specific questions, comments, but ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. With that, Dr. Robinson, to offer your report for tonight.
Sure, I was just checking to, Mr. DiBiasani, you didn't have any recent board emails, correct?
Yeah, I'm sending it, what?
Did you have a recent board BOE email?
Yes, I'm sending one right to you right now that just came in.
Just wanted to check. So
Okay.
that is
Oh,
Computer technology has to take time to get here. You want me to read it?
please go ahead.
So email just came in from Linda Brown, and the subject is thank you, it's to the Board of Education. Dear Superintendent and board members of the Board of Education, thank you. My grandchildren attend Sago in Acadia, and I just wanted to voice my appreciation for all the work that your entire school staff has done to keep them in school. They look forward to every day and have only wonderful things to say about their teachers and principals. It seems they are making an extra effort during this time to make students feel safe and special. Although my grandchildren handled the spring virtual learning fairly well, they struggled with the lack of socialization, as so many did. Your efforts are truly appreciated. Most sincerely, Linda Brown, from Montour Falls, New York. So that just came to the board.
Thank you. That's nice.
So I forwarded to you, Ms. Green,
Thank you.
send her a note at some point. You can, this is filed, thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ms. Stevenson, for your comments related to the issues surrounding critical race, and Mr. Presley for putting the events of last Wednesday in a very interesting context. And I think it's a context that people can surround their minds around, recognizing that we exist in a very hyper-political environment where oftentimes people on sides not really sure how they actually got there, but they're there. And the piece then is how do we overcome the stubbornness of being there, wherever there is, to find a place that we can be much more unified and harmonious in our perspectives and our respect for each other. And I think the two students on the call here that represent the Senate, and Grace here, the student who serves on one of our committees, thank you, Ms. Stevenson, and Grace who serves on one of our committee, exemplify what we want our society to look like, to think like. We don't want and need a singular viewpoint. The beauty of being humans is the ability to rationalize and debate. However, it needs to be always done in a way that's focused on being constructive, building instead of breaking down. So every challenge creates an opportunity. And so I think that our teachers here have been having those conversations, not without pushback, by the way, by some. And I've said to my colleagues that, almost to your words, Mr. Stevenson, we have a responsibility to have students engage in these conversations in environments that's safe for them to grow and learn and understand. That's the only way that could happen. And that's what schools do on a regular basis. So I just wanted to reiterate some of those points as we move forward. In terms of just some quick news before we go into the presentations, as you probably read, recently there's been some changes at the State Education Department, which is significant for us as school districts. The State Education Department recently, the Board of Regents actually, recently appointed or nominated to be appointed Dr. Lester Young to be the new chancellor for the Board of Regents. And that's significant in several ways. One, I happen to know him and know some of his work, and he's been particularly focused on the My Brother's Keepers programs and trying to really focus on equity within school systems, former New York City educator. And so as we have these very global conversations, I think it's important then to also have people with that global mindset and not coming in with a myopic perspective on things versus truly looking at the needs of all students and how do we support the success of all students. So we're looking forward to seeing the direction with that piece of it. I'm going to just briefly transition to an update related to COVID, because that's also a hot topic that we're constantly dealing with. And this presentation is one that the board, I've actually been building on the same presentation over time. So I won't necessarily go through all the slides, actually only the first 4 or 5 slides from the beginning. The state recently changed the zones, and this has been somewhat of a dilemma for us because these designations exist, the orange zones, and now it was 20%, now it's 10% over different time frames. However, there hasn't been a zone designation. And so it's a challenge because, and it's going to go to the second later of this presentation, because we have test kits, we have those things, and we're waiting to see if the state will go to a zone. However, the governor has, in a press conference, I think it was last Friday, mentioned that schools can test and do those kind of things. However, this still exists. So we're trying to find an alignment and try to compel the State Department of Health to align these regulations with the statements the governor is saying, so we can, in fact, execute those things with the type of fidelity we should. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So I just want to point out that the definitions of the zones are changing, the red zones or the orange zones. So it's a constant piece. And so the point now I'm starting to date things. It's the last time where this one was from, so we kind of keep track of what's the most recent one. So related to that, we have been doing a lot of preparation behind the scenes. And it's kudos to a lot of folks behind the scenes. This data is a little bit dated. This was back as of the 7th. I'm sure that we probably know we're higher than it now. we had about 5,200 individuals consent. That's about 49% of the population that's eligible to consent, to put that in perspective. We have here in district 3,840 test kits, the rapid test kits, which are more surveillance tests than not. So we have those test kits in hand. This link is to a video that was shared out a week or so ago with our nurses going through the process of training. So that was great to have them go through that for the first time and see what it's like. So we have gone through training with nurses to administer the test. We also, just today, we practiced a drive-through with the anticipation that when we're going to execute it, for students, we will do a drive-through testing. For staff, we structure ways of doing staff on-site during the school day, some form or fashion, or we may very well have some staff, but the focus right now was drive-through for students, because the largest portion of our consent, which makes sense, are students, and the largest portion of our population are students. So we're trying to make sure that we capture that. So we started some conversation last week, planning for drive-through using the garage bays at the transportation. And I just put this last note on here. This was old news. Now everybody's getting vaccine. Our nurses were one of the first ones to get vaccines right away. The first time that availability came out, our nurses and speech pathologists and those folks jumped on it right away and signed up. And now we have a significant number of people who over the past several days have signed up for the vaccine, and we've been trying to send information as fast as we can get information so people can sign up for the vaccination. So this kind of hard to see, but this is a depiction of the garage. We have actually 6 different bays in the garage, 3 doors that go in and out. And so basically this L is a depiction of how tables are configured. And so today, we actually, and I'm just going to go a little further. Today we actually had, and we'll have pictures later on, I just didn't have the pictures today. Today we actually did a pilot run where essentially cars, you see here, the other cars are stacked up. They come into the garage bay. And so today we did a pilot where we had 4 cars at a time, 2 different testing stations. And what we want to time, we want to find how fast does it take to go through each test. And depends on if individually, it could be as quick as 45 seconds, I think was the fastest time today, or about a minute and a half to go through who you are, swipe, put in the appropriate test kit, and then there's a whole another process with the duplication, with the input of the data into the system after we have the results. That's why we just want to see how fast that piece were in terms of getting cars through. So today, if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking at Mrs. Carmen, I think we had 10 cars go through because we wanted to see a different sequence. We had some cars with 1 student. We had some cars with 2 students, because also we want to see what's that differential, because if we do a random selection, we may get 2 or 3 kids from the same family, or we may get 1 kid from a family to do it. So we did that test today. It was great. A lot of lessons learned from that. Tomorrow morning we are debriefing with the nurses, with transportation folks, with operations folks, with food service folks. It was great. We had a wide variety of different people that are looking at it from a different lens. So we ensure that we're looking at all the nuances. So we're excited about that. And we're gearing up because we're working through some other legal logistics with the MOU now, because we're not in a designated zone. And the minute we're cleared with that, our intention is to have a wide-scale testing sequence with the driving piece. So it's 1, it's faster, 2, it's safer. No one's getting out of the car if there happen to be a positive test. And so in other words, people come in, they get swiped, it's recorded, it has to wait 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes before the results can be verified. And if some point down the road we find out someone is positive, we make the phone call. No one's waiting for their test results on the site. So that's what we're planning. So we did a pilot. It was great to do those things. We have some videos that we're going to use for training. So more information to come on that. And just a little anecdotal piece. We had a family who initially didn't want to consent because they're concerned about it. They're nervous about it. And so because they were nervous about if my child has to do it by herself, she may not be able to do it. And parents wanted to be there. We said that if you're doing it in school, you're not going to be there with your kid holding your hand. But by doing a drive-through thing, it creates a whole different environment for a kid being in a car with their parents, and those type things. So I'll just kind of share some of the backstories that came from this piece. So we're pretty excited about this pilot piece that we're looking to do now. So that's the next phase where we are with COVID. And we could very well be doing a massive testing sequence as early as this weekend. That's the legal piece that we're working through right now with the MOU that the board approved, because the MOU speaks to being executed when a zone is designated. However, we know that the threshold has been exceeded in terms of cases, and so, yes, we could wait for the state to realign their methods, or we could try to realign the methods from the other side, so we're trying to do both things. As well as we are gearing up for the potential of starting doing some pilot with staff doing the building to see how, what's, again, the same time sequence. How long does it take for people now walking into a space? And how long does that take to have the appropriate distance in a gymnasium or someplace, or in an auditorium where you have a lot of space and people spread out? Quick, how long? So we're going to be doing some of those pilots as well in the coming days, so we're ready to do that.
Real quick before you go off of this, if we do move to the drive-through option, and there are a group of parents out there that have said no, now that there's a drive-through option, is there going to be a way for them to change their vote to yes?
So they can. The question at that point is, to be honest with you, we have 3,840 tests. Right now, we have over 5,000, probably even 6,000 people signed up. And yes, and from that 6,000 pool, it's going to be a random selection.
Right.
So let me just make it easier for understanding. So if we had 3,800 tests and we had 4,000 people or 38, whatever, not everyone who signed up is going to be tested. It's going to be a randomization of that too. However, it's not actually a pure randomization in the sense that we are going to say how many people from this particular building, and I have the numbers where it's actually coming out evenly, because we just don't want to have all the students that live in the Tasago zone, because it's not representative of the entire community. So we're going to break it out by buildings, and we have a significant 200 plus roughly students from each one, and then we randomize within those, so we have, again, a broader sample of students. And so not everyone who said yes will be tested, because we simply don't have enough tests for it. And it's a surveillance test. It's a surveillance to say, what does it look like in the broader community of students and staff in relationship to the broader community rate across the county or whatever that designated zone is. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So we were pretty excited about that. And again, kudos to a lot of folks, a lot of nurses, Mrs. Carmen Karam, Barb Saliker, Elizabeth Wood, Kelly, DeFisciani. A lot of folks showed up yesterday when we did the walkthrough and tolerated me, because sometimes when that first meeting is kind of very stern, and then the second meeting we worked through all the details to make sure all the details worked, and we saw it work today. Mrs. Stevenson and Mrs. Miller, we kind of want to sample, and even that, we want to sample the different people, because we want to see how different people experience is going through that. So even today was very deliberate in terms of make sure we don't have all the staff that will say, yay, that was great, or nah, that wasn't so great, versus having a sampling of folks to give us some good feedback. And we'll be reaching out to folks, and so I'm telling you already, if you have some feedback on that, please share. And so to make sure the process runs pretty smooth. So we're pretty excited about that. And related to that, it's still very much hypothetical. We're petitioning, if you will, to, if at some point the state allow for non-health agencies to be test sites, which they just recently did with the University of Albany doing a massive vaccination site, that we're petitioning that we'll be more than willing to vaccinate the 2,000 plus employees in the Group 1B if you guys so inclined, because every year Mrs. Carmen coordinate, in this case with CDPHP, a massive flu clinic. Every year we do a massive flu clinic that a lot of people get the flu shot. So we know we have the infrastructure and the plan to execute that. So we hope that hopefully at some point in the coming days or weeks, that becomes a reality for us as well. So the point I'm making to this is from the very beginning, we were focused on keeping our schools open and providing a quality experience for kids. We know testing and vaccination both are critical components to that as we move forward. So anything we can do to contribute to that, we're trying to do to contribute to those things. So any other question related to that COVID update piece?
I'm curious. So in the sample size of the people that are tested, will people be given the option, or do they have to come through the drive-through? Or meaning, when I say option, if they can get a rapid test through WellNow or through another venue.
So if under the current DOH regulations, if a district is designated in a zone and that person went through your consent process and they get an outside testing, yes, that outside testing can count as a part of your 10%.
Okay,
If that person goes to your consent and you know that they were part of the pool, because in many cases, particularly remember, this is all new
right.
to everyone.
Yeah.
So they weren't sure how many rapid tests would be available and all those things. But now rapid tests are much more readily available, particularly the schools, to do some of those type things. And so yes, the possibility exists that could be part of in designated zone as well.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Robinson, would we get more test kits? Like, would it be something that would be ongoing until
Yes. So
vaccination would become?
So if I'm just kind of going back to this real quick, if you noted here that as long as the school remains in the orange zone, we have to keep doing additional 10%. So if our numbers if school numbers in relationship to the larger community numbers are high, then we have to keep testing more and more till the numbers of the school is lower than the number of the community kind of thing. We don't anticipate that. However, but that's the existence. So then we have to request more test kits as we move forward. The second piece I had on here, Ms. Stevenson, and this would be somewhat brief. I was hoping that, and I actually, it was on while I was doing other work, listening to the governor's state of the state today. Yesterday, he had a continuation today as well. Not a lot of details, particularly related to school and school finance. I think the big part of it is trying to talk about how New York State could create some economic stimulus through a wide variety of initiatives, from gambling to environmental to construction, a wide gamut of things. A steadfast focus on health and COVID. And also, everyone is watching to see where federal dollars will flow. If you watch politics, as you know, with the anticipated balance of power in Washington, D.C., and having a New Yorker in Chuck Schumer as one of those, there's a lot of optimism that New York, by the way, is probably in fact, the largest state generation of funds to the federal government. And so then the notion is that hopefully some of that funds will start flowing back in similar fashion. So I think that's a lot of the focus on that. We'll see how things pan out over the course of the next several days. This is important in many ways because the governor's budget in many ways dictate how the legislature will react to the budget as governed. So right now it's the state of the state piece. We'll see by the end of the week, do we start seeing some documents that reflect some potential financial picture for us as we move forward. So not a lot of real specific school update at this point, but we're constantly keeping our ears to the track, so to speak, to see and hear how fast the train is coming down the track. So those are kind of things that's happening with the state budget implication. I know that you're also very in tune with it, and I appreciate you sending me some information whenever you have access to information too. That's great, so we have paint a bigger picture. You want me to keep going with the next piece? The next piece, as Mrs. Stevenson pointed out, and this is the presentation that I shared back in December with the board vacancy. And so I literally just linked the same presentation. As was pointed out, Mrs. Rajat tendered her resignation. Actually, the correspondence was shared with myself and Mrs. Stevenson on Sunday. And so with that, we'll fold that vacancy into the same process that we have right now. And right now we have 14 individuals who have expressed an interest, and the district clerk has responded to those individuals. So we had like step 3 of that process, and the next step will be those screening questions, and the board will review that process as we move forward. So the board had for Mr. DeLallo's vacancy decided to go with the route of the board appointment versus a special election. And you'll see on the agenda, item number 9 under the business item, is a resolution asking the board to approve a similar process so we can, in fact, look at that pool of 14 candidates to fill the 2 now vacancies that we have with Mrs. Rajat's recent resignation from the board. I'll pause if there are any questions that you have or the board members have.
The regarding New York State, kind of back up one more.
Sure.
Do you have a sense that powers that be, and ultimately we've seen in different years, it comes to 3 people in a room as the kind of the end point of the budget process, but is there a sense of what key priorities are as money potentially becomes available? Has that sort of come through, or is it too early to tell?
Well, from the state perspective, certainly dealing with COVID is a priority. Health is a huge priority. It's always been, but particularly so, and the vaccine and the distribution and infrastructure related to that. A second big piece, and there's been legitimate conversations talking about, because we saw the inequities within schools that were so blatant between school districts, be it access to technology and things of that nature, and some decisions schools had to make that quite frankly eroded the quality of education in some school districts. So there's a lot of conversation looking at the funding formula from the equity perspective in terms of making sure that schools are appropriately funded. The big question with that is when you have a small pool, how far does that go before you start robbing from Peter to pay Paul? And so the equity piece is important. The question is how it's executed is the bigger question. So there's a lot of conversation surrounding those things as well. So those are I think the 2 big pieces that's out there all the time. How does that translate to detail is, as I often say, the devil is always in the detail in any of those things. And so we're watching those. Even the governor has said many times you want to make sure that funding is done in a way that schools and places have what they need. The question is how we define those needs, and as we move forward, I often say that Shenendehowa in this community, we're the quintessential middle-class community. We're too rich to be poor, we're too poor to be rich. We're the quintessential middle-class community by many statistics when you look at it, from household earnings to credentials, college credentials. And when you look at it, it's like defining a middle-class community. So the question is, in that, when you're perfectly average, where you have some places that are significantly wealthier, some places are significantly poorer, what does that mean for you? And so that's always the piece that we're banking on. So even when we plan budget perspective, we always plan from a flat perspective. It's a kind of expectation that we're going to be sort of flat, and then anything else become bonus in terms of our deliberation and decisions moving forward as well. So those are the things that we have to watch very closely because, as you know, the legislature just came back into session a few days ago, and they haven't been in session for a long time. And under the executive order, the governor has been the singular voice for politics and political decisions in the state. So that's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic is going to play out as well in the coming weeks. And what does that mean in terms of people advocating for education and the difference in educational needs from upstate versus downstate versus North Country versus Western New York. Those needs are significantly different from a regional perspective. So we're going to watch that very closely. And I know organizations such as NISBA, I think NISBA has a advocacy thing, something I just recently saw came across that's coming up. I think you also shared it. So some things coming up, and this kind of speaks to the next piece, Mr. Presley. I think you set this up nicely, and I know Mr. Stevenson wants to speak to it as well. Dennis, I don't know if you want to comment on this piece.
Yeah, so as we know, Bob has, Gary was a great mentor for you. You stepped into this position with advocacy in NISBA, and you've taken it and ran with it, and you get it. You understand it. You're able to decipher a lot of this, a lot of the high level, and can break it down for us so we understand. I think you are a very positive and efficient leader in that aspect. So tonight, Dr. Robinson sent me this. The position provides a district with a direct link to NISBA's advocacy efforts, and it is an important interface for sharing legislative information with board members. As an advocacy liaison, the person will have the opportunity and tools to leverage NISBA's governmental relations resources to accomplish the district goals. So with that, hoping tonight to appoint and approve Bob in this role, and I know he's eager, as always, to get going with it.
You know, the nice things you said about him are true, but the most important thing is he enjoys it.
He does like it.
Yeah, he does. That's what I mean.
So that's all for my report. Just the first reading on the policies.
So as Mrs. Karn's coming up to, I know for the first reading, but we do include this Okay, thank you very much. So tonight we're presenting the first reading of policies that went to the Policy Review Committee in December. And one of the policies, as Mrs. Stevenson had said, is the Code of Conduct 4410 and 4410R being the actual regulation. But in regards to that, this is something that we've been working on for the last couple months in policy review and been addressing here at the Board of Education meetings. And designated specific changes have been made to ensure that we are reflecting language, Dr. Robinson has it up here, of when we talk about equity, inclusivity, diversity. And so this is the beginning of some of the changes that we have made to address some of the issues and concerns that we are dealing with today in our society in general and also here at Shenendehowa. And then, as we all know, the Code of Conduct goes to the Board of Education once a year, usually at over the summer, to be approved and ready to go for the beginning of the school year. So this we will be reviewing and updating again, come that time of the year. But it was put forth now because of some of these changes.
And what you see in yellow, the change.
Yep.
Right, the additions.
It's good.
I think it's much stronger. It's timely, especially from what we saw last week, what happened in Washington. These hate symbols do provoke, and it's to provoke in a very negative way, to harm. And to specifically call out those symbols, I think, is important. And so thank you, Dr. Robinson, for supporting that.
Anything else for me regarding first reading?
So similar changes were made in the athletic code of conduct. Well, the regulation, but also the language in the athletic code of conduct. The other ones that are also here are a little bit stronger.
Those, the athletic code didn't, athletic code is more about grades and those type things. This was the one that had all these other things.
It just referenced behavior, right? But it did not state the examples that the code of conduct and the regulation do. You're right, that's correct.
And I just want to comment, because we have talked about this before, that the governor has taken steps to actually make a case for putting it statewide.
Yes, on state property, and also, and a lot of that, ironically, my understanding of the backstories, a lot of that was also from the actual New York State Fair. Apparently, there must have been issues, and so it kind of came in an ag and market kind of approach to policy piece of it, and so yes, there's a state law that's not necessarily education law, but certainly supports the endeavors of education. And I think the point that both Mr. Presley and Mrs. Hoffman made before, that this, to put in context, this isn't a political reaction policy. And I think even our students said it even better, that this is about how do we ensure an environment where the issues of hate, hatred, and bigotry doesn't permeate and cause disruption in the school environment. And so it's important, because oftentimes people look at it as a moral question of right or wrong. It's about more of an ethical question, knowing what the right thing is and taking the actions to ensure that the right things occur. That's a big difference. And I think the policy speaks to action that we'll take to ensure that our school environments are placed that yes, students will have different perspectives, but those different perspectives should never create a hostile environment for any student. Period. So I think the policy speaks to that piece of it as well.
The only other thing I wanted to add is that the other policies, the computerized information, that was strengthened to address the use of technology in the remote learning environment. I actually just copied. Don't worry, I won't read it all. But it also 7317 student use of computerized information. That one, you'll see there are many changes in that one as well, and it's specific to both the using technology in remote environment, but also the Ed Law 2D changes that, that are now reflected in this policy, specific to the privacy of personally identifiable information, and also language that is supposed to be reflected in contracts, et cetera. But just the work here was really well done, and a reflection of the policy team. But thank you.
One thing, I saw this unfold over the last few months, noteworthy that another Capital Region district, folks in Niskayuna, had also been working with this. And one of the comments that one of the school leaders, I believe they actually have someone who's a director of diversity within their school, and she made a point of saying that folks in Niskayuna don't want other districts to simply take this as a cookie cutter rubber stamp and apply it to them. This is a journey of conversations within a district, and I think that's what our policy committee does, is they have these conversations, and then they're brought up to here. But I think it's very helpful in the policy arena that you have administrators, you have board members, you have folks that work with this every day, a specific issue, clear it up. But we also have a transparent process where it does get brought to people. The first reading means we're not going to review it, they're not going to vote on it until a month from now. So we've got a month to get comments from anybody in the district as to what they agree or disagree with here. But it is a sequence of conversations that we had, obviously knowing what else is going on around the world with other districts, but we are doing this ourselves in our district.
Good point, Bob. Okay, any other comments? Moving on to consent items. Treasurer's report. Can I get a motion? Todd is first, Gus is, anyone up second? Comments, questions? All in favor? Motion passes. Minutes, December 15th, 2020. Obviously, Christina was on.
Doesn't
Can
matter.
I get a motion? Todd? Bob, second. All in favor? Motion passes. Action items. Number 1, bids. Diesel fuel, unleaded gasoline, classroom, office supplies, transportation, bus parts. Can I get a motion? Bob is set first, Gus is second. Any comments?
It's a lot of documents.
Right?
240.
I bet you read them all. Didn't you?
I hadn't looked at them all in a week.
Okay, all in favor? Motion passes. Number 2, tax tertiary, always say that.
Tertiary.
Reserve, budgetary reappropriation. Motion? Bob is first, Naomi second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. 3 and 4, I'm going to combine. Contract performative, contract for special education. Can I get a motion? Bob is first, Gus is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. Number 5, scholarships and local grant donations with gratitude. Can I get a motion? Gus is first, Naomi is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. Number 6, resolution for bond refunding. Can I get a motion? Naomi is first, Todd is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. Resolution for records retention schedule.